I'll start with the presidential candidate, Tope Fasua. What does your party, the Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party, stand for? I mean, set the scene for us by presenting a new vision of Nigeria. Your vision.
Thank you very much. I mean, going by the name Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party is a bit long, but you just call us Abundant Nigeria. And I think basically what we're trying to say...
So why did you call that in the first place?
Oh, well, it's all right, but what we're trying to say is that Nigeria is full of abundance, and it's a paradox that in spite of this abundance of especially human resources, apart from natural resources, where we happen to be the country with the highest number of poor people in the world, the highest number of out-of-school children, the highest level of inequality according to Oxfam. I mean, we of late, in the last 1 year, we found ourselves like hitting the radar in a very wrong way and actually gaining some laurels, some Olympiad laurels, for all the wrong reasons. So our idea of a new Nigeria will be a Nigeria where the potentials of the people is actually realized, because we shouldn't be where we are today. And that ties into our economics, apart from our sociology as a people, where people that are set against each other, our diversity has become a problem rather than being an advantage and all of that. So basically that's our vision for this country. I mean, and then when you talk about the hard facts in economics, this is an economy that should be growing in double digits by every means because of
and
the
of course
stage
you
of the
should
economy.
know, you're an economist.
Exactly, because of the stage of where our economy is. As a matter of fact, did the research in the 60s and part of 70s, the US economy was growing at 15, 17, 18%. And here we are, we're growing at 1.5% when the same US is growing at 4.1%. So we should be doubling down on growth big time. We should be doubling down on the quality of life for our people. Over 90 million Nigerians are in extreme poverty. Over 80 million Nigerians, defecate outside, live in conditions that are subhuman. And we're saying that irrespective of the fact that we're fairly new on the scene, we can make an impact on this now. Such that no matter what happens by May 2019, and even starting now, Nigerians must start to live in a much better manner, in a much better environment, and governance, real governance, must come to Nigeria.
Well, what you're saying sounds like what most Nigerians would say. I mean, the ordinary person on the street feels the same way that you do. They'll articulate their concerns the way that you have. I mean, what we're looking for is how you're going to advance that to the next stage of actually translating it into votes that could win an election.
Oh, well, in terms of translating into votes, what you do is when you wake up every morning, you hit the road, you try and see how many people you can talk to. I'm here on a rise, maybe a couple of people listening to me today will feel, well, this guy's
hopefully more than a couple.
And of course, earlier today I've been on another TV station and so on. So we have to keep doing what we're doing until we get to that point. There's one thing, I mean, you're doing the right thing, bringing people like us on board. We need a prime time as well, because the APC and PDP that seem to get the prime time, there's a reason why they're there, because they've been around for a bit, and they were even established at the point where the government was funding political parties. We're not being funded. We have to scrounge and scrape and see however we're going to survive to the next day. However, the bottom line is this, that we need the platform of a political party in order to articulate these ideas and put it in the space to say, this country, we should be taking 50, 70 million people out of poverty over the next 4 years or thereabout. We should be growing at 15% consistently over the next 4 years, over the next five years. India is growing at 8.5% as we speak. 1.4 billion people. I believe we can do it. And we can also improve significantly the livelihoods of our people, their standard of living. Actually, Mr. Charles, we haven't started, all right? And as you can see, I mean, you're here in Nigeria. If you just take a step outside, 100 meters away from here, you begin to see the squalor in which our people live, which actually puts us in a situation of infamy as a country, because the world is watching and wondering why this country can't get its act together. And we're saying that enough already of analysis, enough of writing about this. We need to step in the fray, and that's why we're here.
Now, Dr. Vitalis Ajumba, let's talk about your party, APGA. What do they base their policies on? What is their appeal?
Thank you very much. It is in the doing. Many political parties, when they want to come on board, they promise what they cannot do. I'm sure you've heard about that we are going to provide this infrastructure. We're going to do this. We're going to do. As soon as they come on board, it's quite a different thing. But it's not in APGA. If you go to Anambra State, for example, is an example of a state that is run by APGA, and that state. I'm sure you are from Anambra.
No, I'm not.
You're not from Anambra. You go to Anambra. Yeah. Anambra is linked with good road to every.
I have actually been to Anambra, and in fairness to you, I found it to be really well managed. I mean, absolutely picturesque state. All the little hills and little sort of roads and things. Beautiful.
APGA as a party has a good program. APGA as a party is sticking to its manifesto. Some go on board with a good manifesto. As soon as they go into office, they change the manifesto. So any state that is run by APGA, and Anambra is like a model. If what you see in Anambra is good, then any other state that has APGA that has a candidate in APGA is also going to do the same thing. So APGA is a party that believes in the good service to the people.
Now you're trying to do something in Imo State.
Yes.
That's an uphill task, though, isn't it?
It's not really an uphill because we have Anambra as an example. If you love what is happening in Anambra, come to Imo State and do the same. We have a very good candidate in the person of Ararome, who is doing quite well, and who has done quite well in his business, and he going because he was in another party. And I wouldn't like to mention the name of the party. He was in another party. And Imo people told him, if you go on this party, we're not going to vote for you. Go to APGA, that is a party of the Igbos. Go to APGA, that is doing well in Anambra State. And give us the same type of governance that Anambra State are enjoying. And that is why he's in APGA.
Yeah, but is that not something that is perhaps the wrong approach to Nigerian politics that should be a unifying thing? You just said the party of the Igbos. I mean, you're the first APGA person who's come here who's actually said it's a party of the, because most of the others try and fudge and sort of hum and say, well, no, we're a national party. Well, we just happen to be focused on that part of the country. But you've called it an ethnic party, basically.
Well, it's not really an ethnic party. I am saying that if you go to Anambra, I'm from Igbo State. I'm an Igbo man. If we enjoy what is happening in Anambra, an Igbo man will like exactly what's happening in Anambra to happen in.
So it's in that context that you mentioned it. Okay. Well, let's turn to you.
If APGA is given the opportunity to produce the president of this country, that same thing that is happening in Anambra will happen in Nigeria.
Well, it doesn't follow. But let me turn to you, Professor Jibo Ibrahim. You're the objective voice here. Aside from criticism of the ruling APC and the main opposition PDP coalition, how much are these parties actually trusted on things like the economy? Because I mean, I think Tope was talking about the fact, and he was also hinting at the fact that most of these parties don't actually, they just say they're going to do something and they don't actually do it. But if you look at the manifestos that came out this time, they're pretty comprehensive. I mean, if you look at what the PDP has put out, if you look at what the APC has put out, they've got all their vision, then they've got pages that actually explain exactly how that vision is going to be accomplished.
Well, the manifestos this time, their platform messages are clear, but they've been clear in previous elections. What strikes me really about these elections, that already by mid-2016, a lot of Nigerians felt the two main parties were failing in terms of their expectations. PDP failed, that's why it was voted out. APC was voted in. It took them 6 months to even appoint a cabinet. Things were going extremely slowly. Economic management was poor. We ended up in a recession. And it was in that context that people started looking for an alternative platform. And it's also in that context, really, almost 3 years ago, that this term third force started emerging in terms of what Nigerians were searching for. But there's a paradox in Nigerian politics. Often Nigerians are dissatisfied with parties that exercise power, but they are very slow to latch on to new parties. The fact of the matter is that the big traditional parties have a very high capacity to maintain support for themselves among Nigerians, and you find most Nigerians very unhappy with the choice of those two parties, but end up voting for one of them.
Is that perhaps because they are skeptical of sort of bringing something in that they're not entirely sure about?
I think skepticism is one of the issues, but I think there's just a more fundamental issue. Visibility, getting known costs a lot of money and time. And the new parties have neither the resources nor the time to get their message across.
Right. So and that's a very interesting point you're making, because if you look at parties like APGA, for instance, which have broken ground and actually won governorships and sort of parliamentary elections and that sort of thing, that's because they were much more focused and targeted in a limited area rather than trying to spread across the country, and that suggests that they're doing it sort of the right way, because I mean it's translating into victory. But what about parties like Mr. Fasua's Abundant Nigeria Renewal Party and Kingsley Moalu's Young People's Party, etc., that are making their first entry into the political scene?
I think the expectation among most Nigerians is that there'll be a viable alternative if a large cross-section of dissatisfied Nigerians are confronted with one third force candidate. And there was a lot of attempt to develop processes that would lead to that. Unfortunately, those processes failed. And we have a number of candidates, such as Fasua, such as Ezekwesili, such as Mohalu, who represent this new trend in politics. But because there are too many of them, you don't have a clear
confusing, really.
Alternative. You don't have an alternative. What you have are a number of interesting candidates that for a lot of people are saying, let's study them and the next round we'll see how far they'll go. But Tope, that's not to discourage you.
Just based on what he's saying, what's your reaction to that? Because I mean, there was talk that you guys, even the PDP and the APC, had to come together as some sort of a coalition in order to have the kind of clout to take on, the Nigerian political scene. Our
renaissance, and indeed that's our revolution, right? And I'm speaking well on behalf of myself and a few of those who have come up, not all. It's a revolution that's going on. It's a political revolution. It's bloodless. It's peaceful, but it's intellectual. The reason why an Atiku and a Buhari are putting documents in the space, remember that Mr. Buhari people actually denied that they made any promise whatsoever in 2015. And that was shocking. Because people were confronting them and saying, you said you were going to declare your asset, you said you were going to do this, and the other gentleman, Lai Mohammed, said, we did not promise anybody anything. And then you wonder on what basis were they voted for. But now we're forcing their hand on the power of intellectualism, on the power of ideas to say, you've got to tell us what you're doing. I put my manifesto in the space about 4 or 5 months ago or more, because I knew it was going to be all about the ideas. And even if you look at Atiku's ideas and mine, you'll see a bit of, but again, nobody has a monopoly of knowledge, So that's, in the first place, that's what we have to note, that this is a different kettle of fish, which is not about a few politicians coming together as they did in APC for the purpose of grabbing power. This is a cry for help for Nigeria to say, we've got people who have their senses here together. And that what we are seeing and what we're getting at the level of leadership, especially at the presidency level, is not at par with it doesn't represent what we are in Nigeria.
Right. So
so people are stepping up to say we can do it as well, and these are ideas. And I've always told my colleagues that the best foot forward for us is to dump all our good ideas in the space. If they're going to steal it, let them steal it. But all those ideas, we cannot wait until 2023 before we put it out there. Apart from that, these parties, again, I will repeat, it's not just about romanticism in terms of Nigerians disliking PDP on it. It's because of their access to the wealth of this country. And the fact that oftentimes we see a scenario where they easily dip hands into the resources of this country. And that's why you see at the state level, if any party that's ruling at the state level, nothing happens for any other party on the local government level.
But let's just get I mean, your party, the ANRP, it's got you as its candidate. You're slightly younger. You're perhaps a trifle more positive, more open-minded, more forward-looking.
Thank you, sir.
But beyond all of that, I mean, let's have a dose of realism here. Do you really think that you're going to win the elections in this country?
So basically, first of all, to hack back to what I just said, the point now is, mind you, there's something called the weaponization of poverty. All right, Mr. Charles, I was with Donald Duke a few days back, and we in a session like this, and he actually made a claim that between 1979 and 1983. Shagari budgeted budget was an equivalent of $25 billion. As I'm speaking to you, because I've done a lot of work in this space as well, including going outside to demonstrate, to this government. As we're speaking, the budget for this year is $25 billion. I was talking about the population that has tripled or quadrupled since then. And so we've seen a scenario where the economic policies and even the political, socio-political policies of this country has only impoverished the majority of this country. And those who think they have, a lot of the wealth is based on corruption and cutting corners, and they call it entrepreneurship, So we need a new, and then in terms of me winning, there are two ways of winning. I can either go look for money and borrow money and then compromise myself and get funding from everywhere I could find it in order to delude myself of sitting in some Aso villa before I start to do the things that I need to do. Otherwise, I could also begin to mainstream the ideas that I have, and so I find myself not only as a politician becoming an activist. I've been on the streets at least twice, carrying placards, mobilizing people to say, this is unconscionable. You can't be reducing the budget for 2019 from $23 billion to $23 billion when population is increasing at 3.2% and inflation is eating the value of money at 11.28%.
Right. So you're
countries like South Africa is doing $155 billion in terms of budget. And we say we're the largest economy.
I understand all
so
that.
These are very cogent issues that cannot wait. For the political process and cycle, we need to anchor in and do and work on those things immediately. So I believe that if I can achieve that, I would have won.
Right. So you're something of an agent provocateur, making people think.
Call me that.
Right. Okay. Let me turn to you, Dr. Ajumba. Beyond, a clearly rousing statement from Mr. Fasua there, and of course the novelty of being in politics. How much can these, I hate to use the term and not to sound derogatory, smaller parties really ride the wave and turn it into real success at the ballot box like your party, APGA, seems to have done, at least on the state and parliamentary level?
Yeah. If you ask me why those APGA keep winning in Anambra, I'm using Anambra as an example because it's a state that have been in APGA, and the governors that pass through APGA.
Well, it really is the only state.
Yeah, the only state.
Right. So
now,
let's be clear on that.
When the economy of the state is not doing well, when the governors are not doing well, there's nothing they can expect, because most governors, what they do, they try to impoverish the citizens so that you won't have money to challenge them. And if you don't have money to challenge them, just like the smaller parties, unquote, just like the smaller parties, there's nothing you can do at the time of election, because at the time of election, it's all about money. The voters, if you give them 1,000 naira or 2,000 naira, the party in power will give 20,000 and do vote buying. The smaller parties may not have that money. Even if they have the brightest idea, the best governorship approach that they try to exhibit, but they cannot go far. It's not that they cannot win, but they don't have the money to win. If you see what happened in the past elections, it's all about money. And because the citizens are hungry, they need something to eat. You can imagine an old woman who had been looking for food to eat all day long, and suddenly you ask her to vote, I'll give you 10,000. And she'll now begin to imagine how many days she will use that 10,000. The type of food it is going to give to the family.
Especially when she believes that in any case, the politicians are not going to make any difference anyway. Yeah.
So what they do, the instrument they use is to impoverish the people, so that at the time of election, they bring out the money.
And that's not working in Anambra.
And that's not working out. The ABGA government in Anambra State brought out money and helped the SME. And give them the infrastructure they need. And you can see the economy of Anambra is moving, is growing.
But to be honest, in fairness to the other parties, I mean, Anambra State has always had a high concentration of very wealthy people. I mean, Anambra State, according to some of the statistics we've seen, has the greatest concentration of millionaires per square mile than any other part of Africa. So to that extent, it may not necessarily be your policies that is making a difference.
No, it's the policy, because you need to have an enabling environment.
Right.
If there is no enabling environment, the millionaires or the billionaires you see in Anambra State wouldn't have stayed in Anambra. They probably would have gone just like what happened in Abia during the time of the kidnapping and all that. So we have a good government of ABGA, and that's the same good government that will be transmitted to Imo during the time of election, and they will not take example from what is happening in Abia. I mean, what is happening in Anambra, and vote ABGA in Imo.
Right. So the advice that you would give to parties like Tope Fasua's party?
The advice I would give to them is to preach against money politics. It is good if you give somebody money and he says, give me, or there's no person who will give money that would, during the time of lead, that would reject. But tell them to chop their money and vote the right candidate. Vote the person who will give you good governance.
I like that.
Chop their money. Chop their money and vote.
Well, let's get the objective assessment of Professor Ibrahim here, because you talked about earlier that while the two main parties, the APC and the PDP, the traditional established parties, have lost considerable trust, because the perception is that they've been in government and that they haven't actually entirely, at least, delivered, and therefore they have an image breakdown. Can we say that the newer, smaller parties like the ANRP have had an image build up? In other words, contrary to what these other ones are having an image collapse, these new guys are coming up with new ideas, fresh perspective, and therefore an image build-up that is a sort of makeover away from the traditional or the traditionally held negative view of the Nigerian politician. Or is that much too optimistic an assessment?
Well, the fact of the matter is that they're having quite an impact, especially among younger Nigerians and in the social media, where people could easily access their ideas and their platforms. But they have not penetrated the traditional media. They have very low presence in the major newspapers, for example, and in the major television and radio stations. So their ideas have not spread as widely as they could have. The other challenge is because you are actually talking about multiple voices. We have if I remember correctly, over 50 people contesting for the presidency this time round. That's a lot of voices out there, and it's quite confusing to people trying to remember who said what. So even the good ideas you've picked up in the social media, for many citizens, they have the problem of attribution. They remember, this person said something quite nice, but is it this one or that one? So the question of...
So a crowded field, basically, an overly crowded
field. The field is really crowded.
Right, but let me just ask you this, because we're going to take a break in a moment. You talked about the fact that a lot of these parties have not yet quite broken into the traditional media with newspapers and that sort of thing. And yet you talked about them appealing more to young people. And most young people don't actually read newspapers, let's face it. I mean, they're getting a lot of their information from social media, and that's where these guys are gaining considerable traction. And perhaps it's the fact that the older crowd are not really completely, in a sense, disembodied. I mean, moving completely away from what the young people are actually doing and how they're getting their news. And the other thing, of course, is that the campaigns have just begun. I mean, officially begun. I mean, we have to sort of look at what progress they make, what sort of commercial airtime they buy, assuming they have, because now they can go and buy advertising and put their parties on air and so on. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, the fact that a lot of young people are on the social media and they have access to these messages makes them the party for tomorrow, because people will grow to know them. And one of the difficulties in terms of political party development in Nigeria is this ability to sustain a party through time, through the decades, till that small party of yesterday becomes a big party of today. Like
so in good times and bad times.
Yeah, like the Greens in Europe today. So that's really the vision that I have for them, and that's, I think, the trajectory that they should take. But one also has to look at how Nigerians vote. Okay, young people are on the social media, they will like this new voices in town. But when the vote comes, when the day comes, we've made the point already, I think Tope was making the point about the growth of poverty in this country. A lot of these poor Nigerians don't have access to a lot of the new media. A lot of them are very dependent on patrons. And in any society where you have patron-client relations, when elections come, the question the clients will ask, who are the candidates? What will they be? What names will appear? The names will be Atiku and Buhari, and it becomes very difficult to add these 10 other beautiful new voices that have emerged, but have not yet really imposed themselves on people's consciousness.
Okay, thank you for that so far. This is an absolutely riveting discussion. We will talk more with you in a hot second. You're watching Nigeria, the road to 2019. Plenty more still ahead.